The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council fell silent as Ambassador Michael Reynolds stepped forward. Thousands of alien representatives from across the Milky Way watched from their elevated platforms, some curious, most contemptuous. The massive domed ceiling displayed the real-time positions of every major fleet in known space, tiny points of light moving slowly against the backdrop of swirling galaxies. The 7 Supreme Counselors towered above everyone on their crystalline dais, their faces impassive beneath the chamber's stark blue lighting. Reynolds fought to keep his breathing steady. Unlike the other diplomats with their large entourages and ceremonial guards, he stood alone. Humanity's first and only representative to the most powerful governing body in the galaxy. After 3 years of petitioning, Earth had finally been granted this hearing. He knew it wasn't out of respect. Humanity stands accused of illegal weapons development, unauthorized territorial expansion, and destabilizing regional peace, announced High Counselor Vrax, his translucent skin pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that shifted from blue to purple. The evidence has been examined. How do you plead? Reynolds straightened his simple gray uniform. Behind him he could hear the whispers of the Taurian delegation, the clicking sounds of their mandibles betraying their anticipation. The charges against Earth are without merit, built on fabricated evidence provided by the Taurian hegemony, Reynolds stated firmly, his voice amplified throughout the chamber. We demand a full investigation with neutral observers before any judgment is passed. You demand nothing, interrupted Counselor Ixora, her massive tentacles writhing in agitation beneath her ceremonial collar. Your species has existed in interstellar society for barely 40 cycles, yet you presume to question this council's authority. The chamber's massive holographic displays activated at her gesture, showing images of Earth's orbital defense platforms, research facilities on Mars and Europa, and fleet movements near the Proxima Centauri system. The images were taken from angles that made defensive installations look like staging areas for invasion. These installations exceed your development quota by 300%, continued Vrax, his voice echoing through the chamber. Your permitted fleet size has been violated. Explanation? Reynolds didn't flinch. He had expected this. Those facilities are within parameters established by the Artemis Accords, which predates our admission to Council observation by 15 years. As for our fleet movements, they're defensive responses to Taurian incursions into legally recognized human space. He activated his own data projection, a risk, as junior species were rarely permitted to present evidence. The Council's security systems allowed it, however, and soon everyone could see Taurian warships deploying small objects near Earth colonies. Surveillance devices, weapons platforms, and communication jammers, Reynolds explained, zooming in on the objects. All violations of 17 different treaties the Taurians have signed. All deployed within our sovereign territory. Murmurs spread through the chamber. The Taurian ambassador Grekthal rose to his full 3-meter height, his exoskeleton gleaming under the lights. Lies. Those are scientific research probes, he protested. Reynolds continued unperturbed. Earth has tried diplomatic channels for 3 years. We've filed 67 formal complaints through proper council procedures, all dismissed without investigation. The holographic display changed again, showing a timeline of Earth's complaints alongside council dismissals, often with identical wording despite different circumstances. Irrelevant, Vrax declared, slamming his hand down. The sound reverberated through the chamber, silencing all conversation. The Council has made its decision based on all available evidence. Earth's military capabilities will be reduced to Category 3 status, expansion frozen for 50 cycles, and a Council monitoring authority established on your homeworld to ensure compliance. Reynolds's voice remained steady, even as his heart raced. That would violate our sovereignty under Article 4 of the Charter of Worlds. Earth rejects these terms. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. No junior species had ever directly rejected a Council ruling. Rejection is not an option, Counselor Ixora hissed, her skin darkening to a deep crimson. The enforcement fleet awaits our command in the Kuiper Belt of your own system. They will implement our ruling with or without your cooperation. Reynolds locked eyes with her, then each of the counselors in turn. We are aware of the fleet. We've been aware since they entered our detection range 3 days ago. Then he tapped his communicator. Admiral Khatri, authorization Thermopylae. The enormous display above them flickered momentarily. When it stabilized, New light points had appeared throughout the galaxy map. From behind Earth's moon, 200 ships suddenly appeared where nothing had registered before. Technology that shouldn't exist, stealth capabilities beyond known science. Similar vessels materialized near key Taurian worlds, Council enforcement stations, and strategic resource nodes. The Council has 3 hours to acknowledge Taurian violations and withdraw its judgment, Reynolds stated calmly. Even as security alarms began to sound throughout the chamber, or Earth formally declares war against the Galactic Council, the chamber erupted in chaos. Species that had been allies for millennia began shouting accusations at each other. Several delegates demanded emergency evacuations. Frax slammed his hand down repeatedly, attempting to restore order. "This is suicide," he finally roared when the noise had somewhat subsided. "Our combined forces outnumber yours 1,000 to 1. Reynolds stepped closer to the dais, breaking protocol. Security drones surrounded him instantly, weapon ports open. "Numbers aren't everything, Counselor," he said, his voice carrying despite the commotion. "You should have checked your history. Humans specialize in asymmetric warfare." His eyes narrowed. "And we've been preparing for this day since we first looked at the stars." The security drone suddenly powered down, dropping to the floor with metallic clangs. The chamber's lights flickered. "You have 3 hours," Reynolds repeated, turning to walk out of the chamber. "I suggest you use them wisely." As he left, the giant display showing the galaxy map changed again. Earth ships were moving into position, forming blockades around key Council worlds. And from every human colony, more ships were emerging from hidden hangars and asteroid bases, hundreds, then thousands of vessels, appearing where sensors had detected nothing before. The last thing Reynolds heard before the chamber doors closed behind him was Vrax's bewildered question to his fellow counselors. "How did we miss this? How could we have been so blind?" Reynolds allowed himself a small smile as he walked to the secure communication room to contact Earth. The Council had made their final mistake. They had underestimated humanity's resolve, believing that a young interstellar species would simply bow to the will of ancient civilizations. What they failed to understand was that humans had spent their entire history fighting against overwhelming odds. From the earliest tribal conflicts to world wars to the struggle to reach the stars, humanity had developed a unique talent, turning disadvantage into victory. 3 hours wasn't much time, but Reynolds hoped the Council would make the right choice. War wasn't what Earth wanted, but if war came, Earth was ready. In the secure room, he found a message waiting from Admiral Khatri. "Phase 1 complete. Fleet in position. Awaiting your command." Reynolds took a deep breath and sent his response. "Hold positions. Diplomatic options still on the table, but be ready for Phase 2. Then he sat back and waited. 3 hours to see if centuries of peace in the galaxy would continue, or if humanity would have to teach the Council the hardest lesson they had ever learned. The timer had started, and somewhere in deep space, the Council enforcement fleet was no doubt rushing back toward the heart of Council territory, unaware that they were already surrounded by human ships they couldn't detect. The next move belonged to the Council. But for the first time in its 10,000-year history, the Galactic Council found itself faced with an ultimatum it couldn't simply dismiss. Humanity had spoken. And the galaxy held its breath. Throughout the galaxy, Council military installations went dark simultaneously. Admiral J.L. Khatri stood on the bridge of the EDF Invictus, watching tactical displays as Earth's quantum-encrypted communications network remained intact while Council systems collapsed around them. The massive viewscreen showed real-time updates from across known space, defense platforms powering down, command ships drifting without guidance, and automated weapon systems falling silent. "Status report," she ordered, her voice calm despite the magnitude of what they'd just done. "Operation First Strike at 94% success rate." "Admiral," reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Marcos. "All primary targets neutralized. Minor resistance in the Orion sector, but our virus is adapting to their countermeasures." Khatri nodded. "Just as planned." 3 hours had passed since Ambassador Reynolds delivered Earth's ultimatum to the Galactic Council. Their response had been predictable. They had attempted to activate their enforcement fleet to surround Earth. Instead, their entire command and control infrastructure had collapsed. "What about civilian systems?" she asked. "Untouched as ordered. Power grids, medical facilities, and atmospheric processors all functioning normally." Marcos confirmed. This wasn't about hurting innocent beings. This was about demonstrating power and forcing the Council to negotiate. The holographic communication system flashed with an incoming priority message. It's from the Council chamber, Admiral. On screen. The image of General Drax appeared, his Taurian exoskeleton gleaming with ceremonial markings that indicated his supreme military rank. Behind him stood the 7 Supreme Counselors, their expressions ranging from shock to outrage. "What have you done?" demanded Drax, mandibles clicking rapidly in agitation. "This is an act of war beyond anything." "This is a demonstration," Khatri interrupted coolly. "A small sample of our capabilities. Your military installations are temporarily disabled. No lives have been lost. All systems can be restored within hours once an agreement is reached." "How is this possible?" Drax demanded, his compound eyes reflecting the emergency lighting of the Council chamber. "Your technology is centuries behind ours. Your species has barely mastered basic interstellar travel." The communication expanded to include a split screen. Ambassador Reynolds appeared, standing in what appeared to be an emergency council session. Beside him was a woman Khatri recognized from her briefings, Dr. Eliana Mbeki, Earth's foremost xenotechnology researcher. "Not behind, General." "Different," Dr. Mbeki explained, stepping forward. Her dark skin contrasted with the stark white of her laboratory uniform. "While you focused on energy weapons and shield technology, we invested in electronic warfare and artificial intelligence." She activated a holographic display showing the spread of Earth's cyber attack through Council systems. "For 30 years, your worlds have been adopting our helpful AI assistants. You thought they were simple productivity tools, gifts from a humble new species seeking friendship. The truth dawned on the faces of the Council members. The personal assistants, navigation systems, and household management programs that had spread throughout galactic society had been Trojan horses, seemingly harmless until activated, at which point they executed coordinated attacks against the Council's infrastructure. "This is treachery," shouted Counselor Ixora. Reynolds stepped forward, his expression grim but determined. "No more treacherous than plotting to subjugate a sovereign species based on fabricated evidence. We've accessed your secure communications, Counselor. We know about your arrangement with the Taurians. We know about the resource deposits in our territory that you planned to seize once we were under Council supervision." Khatri watched with satisfaction as the counselors exchanged uncomfortable glances. The plan was working perfectly. "Admiral," Lieutenant Marcos called out urgently, "we're detecting power spikes at Council military headquarters on Centauri Prime. They're attempting to activate their backup systems." "As expected," Khatri nodded. "Execute Phase 2. Across her displays, new signals appeared. From the depths of Jupiter's atmosphere, hidden shipyards activated, releasing thousands of autonomous drone vessels. Similar launches occurred from beneath the ice of Europa, from hidden bases in the asteroid belt, and from caverns on Mars. The small, agile craft weren't armed with conventional weapons. They carried advanced electronic warfare suites, designed to counter any attempt to restore Council military systems. "Impossible," whispered Drax as he watched the feeds showing the massive drone fleet emerging. "We've had monitoring satellites around your system for decades. How could you build this without detection?" "You were looking for the wrong things, General," Khatri replied. "Your sensors scan for energy signatures, radiation, and specific alloys. We developed materials and shielding techniques that don't register on your scanners." On the split screen, Reynolds addressed the Council directly. "We never wanted war. We've spent years attempting to resolve our differences diplomatically. This demonstration proves we could have struck at any time in the past decade. Instead, we chose restraint." Khatri could see the calculations happening behind the counselors' eyes. Their military was temporarily paralyzed, their communications compromised. Their assumptions about human capabilities had been catastrophically wrong. "What are your demands?" asked Vrax finally, his bioluminescent patterns shifting to a dull blue, a sign of submission in his species. "An immediate end to Taurian incursions into human space," Reynolds stated. "A full independent investigation into the false evidence presented against Earth, and recognition of our sovereign right to develop our defenses without Council oversight." Before Vrax could respond, alarms blared across the Invictus's bridge. "Admiral," Marcos called out, "the Taurian home fleet is powering up. They're using isolated systems that weren't connected to the main network. Khatri wasn't surprised. They had anticipated that some elements might remain operational. Launch countermeasures. Target their propulsion and weapons only. The drone fleet shifted, redirecting toward the Taurian forces. Within minutes, the Taurian ships began drifting powerless in space. As you can see, Reynolds continued in the council chamber, seemingly unperturbed by the brief military exchange. We're prepared for contingencies. This is your last chance to negotiate peacefully. The council members conferred among themselves, their discussion heated but brief. Finally, Vrak stepped forward again. We will establish a temporary ceasefire while negotiations proceed, he announced reluctantly. But know this, many council members will see this as confirmation of why your species is too dangerous to remain independent. And we see your actions as confirmation of why we can never trust our sovereignty to your judgment. Reynolds replied evenly. Admiral Khatri will begin restoring your primary defense systems as a gesture of good faith. The rest will follow as negotiations progress. Khatri nodded to her officers, who began the process of selectively releasing council systems from their control. Maintain combat readiness, she instructed quietly. This isn't over. As the communication ended, she turned to her second-in-command, Commander Okonkwo. Status of Operation Deep Dive? Teams are in position on 12 key council worlds, he reported. Waiting for your signal to begin intelligence gathering. Give them the green light, she ordered. I want everything we can get on council operations, particularly their relationship with the Taurians. Ambassador Reynolds needs leverage for the negotiations. As her orders were relayed, Khatri studied the galactic map. Their first strike had been successful beyond expectations, but this was just the opening move in what could become a long conflict. The council had ruled for thousands of years. They would not surrender their authority easily. Meanwhile, in the council chamber, Reynolds was escorted to quarters designated for him during the upcoming negotiations. As soon as he was alone, he activated his secure communicator. Phase 1 and 2 complete, he reported to Earth's Defense Council. Negotiations beginning, but expect significant resistance. The Taurians are pushing the council toward military action despite our demonstration. Understood. Ambassador, came the reply from General Martinez back on Earth. We're accelerating production at all sites. If diplomacy fails, we'll be ready for full deployment. Reynolds looked out at the glittering expanse of the council hub, the artificial world that had served as the center of galactic government for millennia. Its grandeur was meant to intimidate representatives of younger species. Until today it had worked. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, he said quietly. But if it does, the council will learn that underestimating humanity was the last mistake they'll ever make. 3 weeks into the conflict, the Galactic Council chambers were in chaos. Representatives shouted over each other as news of the Proximan Alliance's withdrawal from the council spread through the assembly. The massive central display showed Proximan defense forces activating their boundary shields, effectively cutting off council access to their sector of space. Order! I demand order! High Counselor Vrak shouted, but his authority carried less weight now. The carefully constructed unity of the council was fracturing before his eyes. Ambassador Kalen of the Centauri Confederation rose next. In light of recent developments, the Confederation also formally declares its neutrality in this conflict. Our borders are closed to military vessels of both Council and Earth forces. The announcement sent another wave of panic through the chamber. The Centauri controlled key hyperspace junctions. Without their cooperation, Council supply lines would be severely compromised. Ambassador Michael Reynolds watched from his designated area, keeping his expression neutral despite the diplomatic victory unfolding before him. Earth's strategy was working. They didn't need to defeat the Council militarily. They just needed to isolate them politically. Meanwhile, 7 light-years away from the Council hub, Commander Thomas Okonkwo and his team of 6 elite operatives moved silently through the underground tunnels beneath the Taurian capital city. Their adaptive camouflage suits adjusted constantly to match their surroundings, making them nearly invisible to Taurian sensory organs. Security checkpoint ahead, whispered Lieutenant Park through their neural comm system. 3 guards, automated scanning system. Okonkwo signaled a halt with a hand gesture. Bypass route? Negative. All access to the central data core passes through checkpoints. Okonkwo considered their options. They had been on the Taurian homeworld for 5 days now, working their way toward the central government complex. Their mission: extract evidence of Counselor Vrax's secret dealings with the Taurians, proof that the campaign against Earth had been orchestrated at the highest levels of the Council. Deploy EMP disruptors, he decided. Narrow focus, 5-second burst. Aim for their communication implants first. The team moved with practiced efficiency. Small devices no bigger than coins were placed on the tunnel wall nearest to the checkpoint. When activated, they released a precisely calibrated electromagnetic pulse that disabled the Taurians' technology without triggering broader alarms. The guards collapsed, their nervous systems temporarily scrambled by the failure of their cybernetic implants. The scanning system blinked out. Move, Okonkwo ordered. We have 3 minutes before the system automatically reboots. They rushed through the checkpoint and deeper into the complex. The intelligence they'd received from their advance units had been accurate so far. The central data core was located 6 levels down, in a chamber protected by multiple security layers. Something's not right, muttered Specialist Diaz as they reached their destination. Security is lighter than intel suggested. Okonkwo nodded. Either their information was wrong or this was a trap. Proceed with caution. Full spectrum scan before we enter. The scans revealed no immediate threats, but that didn't ease his suspicion. They entered the data core, a vast spherical chamber where crystalline storage units pulsed with light, connected by streams of energy that carried information between nodes. Begin extraction, he ordered. Priority files first. As his team connected their specialized devices to the Taurian network, Okonkwo kept watch. They had trained for years for missions like this, studying Taurian behavior, technology, and security protocols. Even so, infiltrating the homeworld of one of the oldest species in the galaxy was a desperate gamble. What they discovered in the data files exceeded their worst expectations. Not just corruption and illegal dealings between Vrax and the Taurian High Command, but plans for the systematic elimination of younger species showing too much potential. Earth was merely the latest target in a pattern that stretched back thousands of years. Commander, Diaz called out softly, you need to see this. The files showed detailed surveillance of a dozen emerging species, all marked for containment or guided development, euphemisms for subjugation or deliberate technological suppression. The Council wasn't just a governing body. It was a mechanism for keeping younger species permanently subordinate to the founding races. Download everything, Okonkwo ordered. This changes the entire picture. Just as they finished copying the critical files, alarms began to sound throughout the complex. Extraction route compromised, reported Lieutenant Park, checking her tactical display. Heavy security forces converging from 3 directions. Okonkwo made a quick decision. Alternate route. Maintenance shaft to surface level. Then split into paired teams. Rendezvous at Emergency Point Delta. As they moved out, Okonkwo sent a burst transmission to their extraction ship waiting in high orbit. The data they'd gathered needed to reach Earth, even if they didn't make it out themselves. Across the galaxy on the remote world of Viridian, Ambassador Lucia Reyes stood before the assembly of the Veil Collective, a reclusive species that had maintained strict neutrality in galactic affairs for millennia. Their translucent bodies glowed with internal light as they communicated through patterns of bioluminescence. We understand your reluctance to become involved, Reyes said, addressing the Veil Elders directly. For 10,000 years, you've kept your distance from Council politics. We respect that independence. In fact, we share your desire for self-determination. The First Elder's light pattern shifted in what humans had learned to recognize as skepticism. Your conflict threatens stability throughout known space. Why should we risk our neutrality? Reyes activated a holographic display. This is technology we've developed specifically for your environmental needs. Atmospheric processors that work with your unique biology, allowing you to colonize worlds that were previously uninhabitable for your people. The display showed the systems in operation, creating the precise mix of gases and energy fields that the Veil required. In exchange, she continued, we ask only for passage through your nebula territories, not for military vessels, only for civilian transport and medical ships. The Elders conferred among themselves, their light patterns flickering rapidly in private communication. Finally, the First Elder approached. The Council has never offered us such technology. They declared our biological needs too specialized to warrant development resources. Its lights pulsed in what might have been curiosity. Why would humans invest in adaptations for a species so different from themselves? Because diversity makes us all stronger, Reyes replied simply. Earth has hundreds of ecosystems, thousands of cultures. We've learned that different perspectives lead to better solutions. We don't want all species to be like us. We want each to thrive in their own way. This philosophy was so contrary to Council doctrine that the elders took time to process it. For centuries, the Council had pushed for standardization across species. Common legal systems, compatible technologies, unified cultural practices. The idea of embracing differences as a strength rather than a problem to solve was revolutionary. Back at the Council hub, Admiral Khatri's fleet maintained its strategic positions around key Council worlds. Her predictive defense systems, built on centuries of human game theory and military strategy, had so far anticipated and countered every move by Council forces. Admiral, her communications officer called out. Incoming transmission from the Council chamber. Priority 1. The main screen showed an emergency Council session in progress. Councillor Vrax was being formally challenged by the Artaxian representative, a significant development, as the Artaxians were one of the founding species of the Council. We withdraw from this conflict, the Artaxian announced, their resonant voice carrying through the chamber. The evidence presented by Earth's ambassadors cannot be ignored. Humanity fights not from aggression but for survival. It is clear that certain elements within this Council have abandoned its founding principles. Khatri watched with satisfaction as more representatives rose to align themselves with this position. The political landscape was shifting rapidly. Council unity was crumbling in the face of Earth's revelations. Her tactical officer approached with a secure datapad. Commander Okonkwo's team has completed their mission. Data extraction successful, though 2 operatives were lost during exfiltration. Khatri closed her eyes briefly in acknowledgement of the sacrifice. Transmit the files to Ambassador Reynolds immediately. And prepare our Phase 3 contingencies. The Taurians will become more desperate as they lose political support. As she gave these orders, another alert came through. The Veil Collective had granted Earth passage rights through their territories. This opened a new supply route that bypassed Council-controlled space entirely. The diplomatic front is progressing better than expected, Khatri noted. But maintain battle readiness. This is the most dangerous phase, when our opponents realize they're losing. On Earth, the Defense Council reviewed the latest developments with cautious optimism. General Martinez studied the galactic map, where more and more sectors were turning from the red of hostile territory to the yellow of neutral space or the green of allied regions. 3 weeks ago, we stood alone against the most powerful political entity in known space, he remarked. Now, the Emergency Council session stretched into its 3rd day. Ambassador Reynolds stood firm despite the exhaustion evident in his stance. On the central display, tactical maps showed Council forces regrouping for what intelligence suggested would be a massive counterattack aimed at Earth itself. The political fracturing of the Council had not yet translated to military advantage. The core fleets remained loyal to Vrax and his allies. This conflict can still be resolved diplomatically, Reynolds stated, addressing the remaining Council members. The evidence we've presented proves that Earth was targeted unjustly. We ask only for acknowledgement of our sovereignty and investigation into those responsible. Councillor Exora's tentacles writhed in barely contained rage. You infiltrated the Taurian homeworld, hacked our secure networks, and crippled our defense systems. These are not the actions of a species seeking peace. They are the actions of a species fighting for survival, Reynolds countered calmly. Would you have preferred we simply surrendered to the fate you had planned for us? Before Exora could respond, the chamber's security alarms activated. Armed guards surrounded the Council dais as classified intelligence warnings flashed across their private displays. This session is suspended, announced Vrax abruptly. All non-essential personnel will evacuate immediately. Reynolds was escorted back to his quarters, where he found Dr. Eliana Mbeki waiting with an urgent communication from Earth. Her normally composed features showed tension as she activated the secure channel. They're mobilizing everything they have, she said without preamble. Our intelligence networks report movement of Council reserve fleets from deep space. They're preparing a direct assault on the Sol system. Reynolds nodded grimly. We expected this. Are we ready? That's why I'm here. Mbeki hesitated, then continued. The Defense Council has authorized Operation Ancestral Key. Reynolds felt the blood drain from his face. They can't be serious. That's a theoretical project we haven't tested. We don't have a choice anymore, Mbeki interrupted. Our conventional forces can't withstand a full-scale council assault. This may be our only option. The communication screen changed to show a live feed from Earth. Deep beneath the Mariana Trench, submersible vehicles surrounded a massive excavation site. Powerful lights illuminated what appeared to be an ancient vessel embedded in the ocean floor. Not of human design, but something far older. The dating puts it at approximately 75,000 years old, Mbeki explained. It matches fragments we found at other sites across Earth. We've suspected for decades, but now we have confirmation. Humans didn't evolve naturally on Earth. Reynolds stared at the screen, processing the implications. We're descendants of refugees. Yes, refugees from a war so devastating it wiped our origins from history. Mbeki's voice grew softer. The vessel contains a database, a record of who we were before, and knowledge that was purposely hidden within our genetic code, awaiting reactivation. The feed showed Dr. Victor Novak, Earth's leading xenogeneticist, approaching a console within the ancient ship. His team had spent years deciphering its interface and power systems. We're ready to activate the ancestral database, Novak announced. If successful, it will trigger the dormant genetic memories in humans throughout the galaxy. Reynolds understood the risk. This wasn't just about accessing technology. It was about changing humanity itself, awakening aspects of their nature that had been deliberately suppressed for thousands of generations. Do it, he said finally. We've run out of alternatives. On the screen, Novak placed his hand on the ship's console. Ancient systems recognized his DNA pattern and activated. A pulse of energy spread outward from the vessel, invisible to conventional sensors but detectable by the specialized equipment Mbeki's team had developed. Transmission successful, Novak reported. Activation signal is propagating through our quantum communication network. All human settlements should receive it within hours. Reynolds turned to Mbeki. How long until we know if it worked? The process is gradual, she replied. Hours to days, depending on individual genetic receptivity. But reports are already coming in from the lunar colonies. People experiencing flashes of knowledge they never learned. Skills they were never taught. Across the galaxy, humans began experiencing strange sensations. Soldiers and civilians alike found themselves suddenly understanding technologies they had never studied, recalling combat techniques no one had taught them, and accessing scientific knowledge that had been locked away in their very DNA. Lieutenant Imani Williams, stationed on a remote outpost near Taurian space, was the first to make another critical discovery. As the genetic memories awakened in her, she began recognizing patterns in the biological signatures of certain council races. They're like us, she reported to Admiral Khatri, her voice trembling with the implications. The Artaxians, the Lyrans, even some Proximan subspecies, they share genetic markers with humans. They're distant cousins, evolved along different paths but from common ancestors. Khatri understood immediately what this meant. They could be awakened too, potentially. The markers are more diluted but present. This changed everything. If certain council races shared humanity's heritage, they might be influenced by the same activation signal, potentially turning the council's own forces against them from within. As this revelation spread, previously hostile worlds began questioning their allegiances. Reports flooded in from across human space, engineers suddenly understanding how to build technologies centuries beyond current science, military officers developing strategies that countered council tactics with uncanny precision, diplomats intuitively grasping the psychology of alien species they'd never encountered before. On the Invictus, Admiral Khatri received a priority alert. The Taurians, seeing their council allies abandoning them and sensing the shift in power, had launched their attack against Earth ahead of schedule. Their massive armada had emerged from hyperspace near Jupiter, bypassing the outer defense networks. All ships to battle stations, she ordered. Execute Operation Lazarus. Across the galaxy, dormant human technology began activating. Ancient defense systems hidden in asteroid belts and planetary crusts, powered up after millennia of silence. The quantum entanglement network that humans had secretly established connected these systems into a unified defense grid. In the council chamber, Ambassador Reynolds was summoned for an emergency meeting. The 7 Supreme Counselors waited, their expressions ranging from hostility to fear. "Explain what you've done," demanded Vrax. "Our scientists detect a wave of unknown energy spreading throughout human territories. Is this a weapon?" Reynolds looked at each counselor in turn, seeing them with new clarity as his own ancestral memories continued to awaken. "Not a weapon, a key. We've unlocked what was hidden inside us. Speak plainly, human." "We've discovered the truth about our origins," Reynolds said. "Humans didn't evolve naturally on Earth. We're descendants of a far older civilization, refugees who fled there after a devastating conflict." He activated a holographic display showing DNA sequences, highlighting specific patterns. "These markers exist in our genetic code, deliberate modifications made by our ancestors to hide knowledge within us. Knowledge that could only be accessed when we reached a certain technological threshold." The counselors exchanged troubled glances. This was beyond anything they had anticipated. "What knowledge?" asked Ixora, her hostility tempered by growing concern. "Our true history, the technologies our ancestors possessed, and something else you should find." "Interesting. Evidence that we're not the only descendants of that ancient civilization." The display changed to show comparative DNA analyses of humans alongside several council species. Key sequences were highlighted, showing unmistakable similarities. "Impossible," whispered one of the counselors, an Artaxian whose species had always claimed to be one of the first intelligent races in the galaxy. "The founders you revere as the architects of your council," Reynolds continued. "They were humans, or what humans once were before the fracturing wars scattered us across the stars. This galaxy was our home long before your civilizations evolved." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The council had spent thousands of years suppressing younger species, never realizing they were actually suppressing the descendants of those who had come before them all. "The Taurians have launched their attack on Earth," Reynolds informed them. "We've activated our defensive systems. I suggest you recall your forces immediately, or they will be caught in the crossfire." "What defensive systems?" Vrax demanded. "Our scans show nothing beyond your conventional fleet." Reynolds smiled sadly. "That's because you've been looking with eyes too young to see the oldest technologies. Watch your displays." On the central holographic projection, new signals began appearing throughout the Sol system.
"Ancient installations dormant for millennia."
"We're coming online. Defense platforms built into moons and asteroids, energy fields stabilizing around Earth, and mysterious structures emerging from beneath the surfaces of Mars and Venus. This is your final chance," Reynolds stated firmly. "Recognize Earth's sovereignty. Acknowledge the crimes committed by members of this council. Establish a true peace based on mutual respect, or witness firsthand why our ancestors were both feared and respected across this galaxy." As he spoke, reports came in. The Sol system had become a battleground unlike any the galaxy had witnessed in 10,000 years. The Taurian Armada, backed by loyalist council forces, fought desperately against defenses they barely understood. Admiral J.L. Khatri stood at the center of Earth's command network, her mind directly interfaced with the ancient systems that had awakened throughout the system. Through this connection, she perceived the battle in its entirety. Every ship, every weapon, every tactical decision made by enemy commanders. The neural interface translated this flood of information into something her human consciousness could process and respond to. "Their formation is breaking," reported Commander Lin from the tactical station. "The Taurian flagship is attempting to regroup at Mars orbit." Khatri nodded, already aware. Her thoughts directed a cluster of defense platforms hidden within Mars's smaller moon, Deimos. Energy fields activated, creating a web of gravitational distortion that the Taurian ships couldn't escape. "Disable their weapons and drives," she ordered. "No destruction unless absolutely necessary." This wasn't about annihilation. It was about demonstrating that further resistance was futile. Earth wanted peace, but peace on equal terms, not as subordinates to council authority. On the Taurian flagship, Admiral Grekthal watched in disbelief as his ships lost power one by one. Their most advanced shielding had proven useless against weapons that seemed to ignore conventional physics. Their electronic countermeasures failed against systems that operated on principles their science couldn't comprehend. "We have a priority transmission from Earth." "Command," his communications officer reported, mandibles clicking nervously. Put it through, Grekthal ordered. There was no point in refusing communication now. Admiral Khatri's image appeared on his screen. Your fleet is disabled, Admiral. Your weapons are offline. Your council reinforcements have been recalled. This conflict is over. Grekthal's compound eyes flashed with the Taurian expression of rage. This proves nothing except that you've been hiding your true capabilities, a violation of council law. Laws created to keep emerging species subjugated, Khatri replied calmly. Laws enforced selectively to maintain the power of founding races. That era is ending today. In the council chamber, Ambassador Reynolds stood before the remaining representatives. Many had fled when the battle began, but those who stayed were witnessing a fundamental shift in the galactic order. The evidence is undeniable, Reynolds stated, displaying the findings from the ancient vessel and the data Commander Okonkwo's team had recovered from the Taurian archives. For millennia, the Council has systematically suppressed emerging civilizations. Technological development has been restricted, cultural evolution channeled into approved patterns. Species with too much potential have been contained through manufactured conflicts or resource manipulation. Murmurs spread through the chamber as representatives of middle-tier species recognized the truth in his words. Their own civilizations had experienced the invisible ceiling that prevented them from advancing beyond certain boundaries. But there's something more, Reynolds continued. Something even the Council's founders didn't know. The true history of this galaxy, a history that was nearly erased. He activated a holographic simulation reconstructed from the ancestral database. It showed the galaxy as it had been 100,000 years earlier. A thriving network of interconnected civilizations, all descended from a single spacefaring culture that humans now recognized as their ancestors. We call them the progenitors, Reynolds explained. They established the first interstellar civilization in this galaxy. As they spread across the stars, they adapted to different environments, diverging genetically but maintaining their connection through shared knowledge and values. The simulation showed this golden age, then the growing conflicts that emerged between different branches of the progenitor civilization. Political differences became ideological divides. Resource competition led to territorial disputes. Eventually, a devastating war erupted, the fracturing war that shattered their unified culture. The survivors scattered, Reynolds continued, his voice solemn. Some fled to distant worlds like Earth, hiding their technology and suppressing their own advanced knowledge to avoid detection. They modified their genetics to lock away dangerous technologies until their descendants reached sufficient maturity to use them wisely. Simulation showed the aftermath, the slow re-emergence of intelligence across the galaxy, new species evolving on worlds the progenitors had seeded or influenced. And finally, the formation of the Council by races who had no memory of what came before them. The founders of your council discovered fragments of progenitor technology, Reynolds explained. They reverse-engineered what they found, claiming it as their own innovation. They used this advantage to establish dominance over species that evolved later. High Counselor Vrax rose from his seat, his bioluminescent patterns shifting rapidly in agitation. These are lies, fabrications to justify your aggression. The genetic evidence is irrefutable, Reynolds countered. Several council races, including your own counselor, carry diluted progenitor markers. You've been suppressing your own distant relatives without knowing it. As this revelation spread throughout the chamber, another crisis emerged. On the main tactical display, a Taurian vessel separated from the disabled fleet near Mars. It accelerated toward Earth's sun, its energy signature changing in a way that alarmed the watching representatives. They've activated a Nova inducer, gasped one of the Lyran delegates. They mean to collapse your star. It was the desperate act of a civilization facing the end of its dominance. If they couldn't control Earth, they would destroy the entire system. The weapon had been forbidden by council law for millennia, but the Taurians had clearly maintained their arsenal in secret. Reynolds watched in horror as the vessel approached the sun. Earth's newly awakened defenses were focusing on protecting the planets. None had anticipated this suicidal attack on the star itself. Admiral Khatri, he called through his communicator. Can you intercept? Through their quantum link, Khatri's response was immediate. Redirecting assets now, but the inducer is already powering up. If it detonates near the solar surface, they were interrupted by a surprising development. The nova inducer, nearly at its target, suddenly changed course. Instead of continuing toward Earth's sun, it reversed direction, accelerating back toward the disabled Taurian fleet. "What's happening?" Reynolds demanded. Dr. Mbecki's voice came through the communication channel. "It's the ancestral safeguards." The weapon was built using progenitor principles. They included fail-safes in all their dangerous technology. It's detecting the presence of progenitor descendants and refusing to target them. On the tactical display, the nova inducer changed course again, now heading directly toward the Taurian homeworld. High Counselor Vrax watched in horror, realizing that his ally's weapon was turning against its makers. "Stop it," he pleaded with Reynolds. "Billions of innocent Taurians will die." Reynolds turned to Admiral Khatri, who was already working through her neural interface. "The safeguard is redirecting it to what it perceives as the source of the threat," she reported. "I'm attempting to override, but the system is responding to protocols I don't fully understand yet." "Another historical lesson," Reynolds told Vrax as they watched the unfolding crisis. "Never deploy a weapon created with technology you don't fully comprehend." The builders of that device, our ancestors, included safeguards against using it on their descendants. With seconds remaining before the nova inducer reached Taurian space, Khatri finally managed to access the deeper command protocols. The weapon detonated safely in deep space, its destructive potential dissipated without harming any inhabited worlds. The chamber fell silent. The demonstration of power was complete. Earth had not only defended itself against the combined might of the Council, but had shown mercy when revenge would have been easy. "This conflict is over," Reynolds announced to the assembled representatives. "The old Council has failed in its purpose. The evidence of its corruption and abuse of power is now available to every species in known space." In the aftermath, the structure that had governed the galaxy for millennia collapsed. The old Council dissolved as species after species withdrew their support. A new galactic accord began to form, with Earth not as a member but as a founding architect. Admiral Khatri's fleet stood down as peace treaties were signed. The ancient defense systems returned to dormancy, though now humanity knew how to reawaken them if needed. 6 months later, Reynolds addressed the first assembly of the new galactic accord. Representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered, many attending such a meeting for the first time. Species previously deemed too primitive for full participation in galactic governance. "We never wanted domination," Reynolds told them. "Only recognition and respect. The Council's mistake wasn't challenging us. It was assuming we weren't prepared. Humanity doesn't seek war, but we've never forgotten how to win one." The genetic awakening continued to spread, reconnecting scattered human descendants across thousands of worlds. As memories of ancient wisdom returned, the galaxy entered a renaissance of rediscovered knowledge and the beginning of humanity's true return to the stars. Dr. Mbecki's team made another critical breakthrough, the ability to activate dormant progenito